Hey there, welcome to the NBA DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts for the DFS build channel. Going to go over this 3-game slate for DraftKings on Monday, April 22nd. Handed out some good picks on Friday, but took the weekend off, but we are back at it. Hopefully we can win some cash, help you out a little bit. All three of these games tonight do have relatively close spreads, and one in particular looks good as far as totals go. But like I've said many times on a tiny slate like this, when you get looking at 2 or 3 games, I don't really worry about that much. I probably lean away from the game that is going to have most of the defense and slow pace and low scoring. And it's probably going to be Magic versus Cavs. So it's probably the game I try to get away from the most, but I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to play the best plays and make the best possible lineups. I'm using the DFS Hero lineup optimizer. If you are on the hunt for a new tool and want a couple different things to help you out, help you get a takedown, you can give it a try, and you actually can get 15% off when you sign up using our link in the video description below. If this video helps you out at all, please give it a like so I know that, and also consider subscribing to our channel, the DFS Build, so we know we're doing a good job, and also you get alerted to future videos just like this. All right, let's dive right into it. We got Magic and Cavs as the first game. The Magic are actually kind of popping in the system just because of value. They're cheap. Banchero looks pretty good at 8.1K. I think he's a little bit underpriced. The Cavs are not a good matchup by any means, but that's a really good price for him. He did get 36 fantasy points in the first game, but they were held to 83 points. I mean, I wouldn't really expect a whole lot of a different scenario. He had 9 turnovers. So it's not a good spot, but he does project well. He does have a 30% boom rating at DFS Hero. He has monster usage. He played 41 minutes in game 1. He's going to play a ton. He's going to shoot a lot. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. So as far as Magic guys go on a high-end level, I'm okay with it. And for the slate, he's going to be – actually, he's coming to a 25% ownership. So the Magic ownership is a little bit heavy and kind of gross when you think about it. That said, I do have a little bit of interest in some Magic guys. Banchero is probably not the one I'd go with, though, especially if he's coming in at like a chalky ownership at 25%. I think he's a good play at that price, and I am interested in that projection right now, but not at that ownership. If he's coming at that ownership, I'm going to look at something else. Franz Wagner, though, hard to get away from Franz Wagner at 6.5K just because he's going to get monster minutes. In game 1, he was really good with 40 fantasy points in 38 minutes. So he's going to play. He's going to do a lot. He's a little bit too cheap for what he can bring to the table. So if you're looking at Banchero versus Wagner, it's big-time Wagner for me. Again, the only problem is he's going to be owned. 30% ownership because of that price. So anytime you're looking at chalky Magic, I definitely try to get away from that, and I probably will on this slate. There are some chalky Magic guys that I do like. Like I said, Jalen Suggs is one for sure at 5K flat. Very, very appealing for a guy who's going to push for 35 minutes in a playoff game. I mean, this is the playoffs. These guys are not taking breathers. All these teams, for the most part, are playing their starters as much as they can. Suggs is a really good defender, so they need him to try to slow down Donovan Mitchell and even Darius Garland to a lesser extent. So at 5K flat, I like him quite a bit. So no qualms going to him. His ownership right now at 24% is not that egregious, especially compared to the other Magic guys here. So I would gladly go away from Banchero and Wagner and eat the Suggs chalk because he's less owned than both of them. Jonathan Isaac at 4.5K. He's starting. He's pushing for 30 minutes. He's a good per minute producer. I don't mind eating the 45% ownership chalk here at all. He's just a great value play on a 3-game slate. Where things get dicey is when we start looking at 3.4K Gary Harris. He could always get hot and pay off that salary in like the first quarter. I mean, he can shoot threes. Unfortunately, that's about all he does. So if he's not going to, be lights out as a shooter, it's going to be hard for him to make up for. It's a cheap price tag, so I'm fine with it, but he's going to be 34% owned. If Gary Harris is going to be chalky, I'm just probably not going to do it. He had 8 fantasy points in game 1. So let that sink in. Obviously, he can pay this off pretty quickly, and he's going to play as a starter for them. I just don't really love it. I think I'll just trust ownership here, or go away from ownership if it's like really out of control, and right now it kind of is. So can you play Gary Harris? Is he a good play relative to the slate and his role and all that? Sure, he's fine. I probably will not play him, though. As far as the rest of Magic go, I don't think anybody really stands out. Let's just take a real quick look at the first game. Yeah, they're playing their starters as much as they can, and then they're splitting the minutes between like the 5 guys off the bench. So if we're to take anything away from game 1, guys like Wendell Carter, Joe Ingles, Mo Wagner, Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, they're all punt worthy for tournaments, especially if you're going to get into a situation where Gary Harris is chalky at 3.4. You absolutely can just pay up a little more for Cole Anthony, or pay 100 more for Fultz, or drop down 200 for Ingles, and just hope that one of those guys get more minutes over Harris, or maybe Gary gets in foul trouble, that kind of thing. I'm not going to mess with it personally, but that is something you can consider. So I like the value there. Just as a summary, Isaac and Suggs I like a lot, and I will play them gladly. I'll probably be fading the rest if I'm doing one lineup. On the other side, Donovan Mitchell just continues to be underpriced, 8.5K for a guy with a 50-point fantasy ceiling. I mean, the ceiling's actually greater than that, but he's only coming in with a 42-point fantasy projection, which is less than Banchero. It's just a little surprising to me. The pace of this game sucks. Orlando defends well. It's not a good matchup for either side, but Donovan Mitchell at 8.5K is tough to completely write off. So I do like Donovan Mitchell at 8.5. I think everybody else is just okay. They kind of eat into each other a little bit. I mean, Jared Allen is a totally fine play, and Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, all these guys are at 7.2K or cheaper. So based on price alone, they're viable. And based on projection, I think they're okay. None of those 3 guys really projects as a total smash play. And like I said, the pace and the matchup, it's not really very inviting. So if I'm going to play somebody here, I'll just go all the way up for Spida. I mean, if the Cavs are going to have a lot of success, it's going to be on the heels of Mitchell having, blow up games. In game 1, he scored 30 points. He didn't do much else, so he really didn't pay off the salary like we would want him to. But yeah, again, he's not that expensive. Usually during the regular season, he'd be upwards of 9.5, 9.5K. So you're getting a pretty significant discount due to the pace and matchup that he's up against. So it's basically Spida or bust for me here. The value for the Cavs is not very inviting. So yeah, I think all the Cavs starters are in play because of price, but the only one I really like is going to be Mitchell. All right, next game we have the Sixers and Knicks. The Knicks took the first game. So Philly's going to be trying to even up the series here. I kind of lean Philly here. I think this is going to be a pretty good series overall. So I kind of think we should be looking at the Philly side of things. I will note Joel Embiid is questionable. He's going to be questionable like every game because of his, his knee recovery thing. But he played 37 minutes in game 1. He was pretty good. He had 29 real points. I think he had like 50 fantasy points. Let me double check that real quick. Let's see, 52. So it's like right on par with kind of like a Joel Embiid floor game. Just about kind of like what we expect at kind of the minimum. If we're going to pay for Embiid, he's got to get 50 plus fantasy points, and then we'll start, feeling a little bit better about it. But I think he's going to play. He'll play, and I think he's going to play really well. I think he's going to smash here because he's going to have to. He might have to even more than usual because Tyrese Maxey is questionable with an illness. If Maxey's in at 7.9K, I think he's a decent tourney play. I kind of hope he is in, and then I'll just kind of ignore him because I don't like playing guys who are sick. Their stamina and endurance and just overall efficiency, it's very dicey when you're sick. I don't know what his exact illness is, but if it's upper respiratory, if it's like stomach sickness, I mean, there's so many different things that it could impact. And if you ever play basketball with a virus, I remember playing basketball in college when not like high level college, like intramurals people. But I had like a legit virus, and it was really hard. It was really hard to run around and play. So I just don't like playing guys when they're sick. Obviously, you can always get like that Jordan flu game kind of thing, but why play with it when there's other viable options on the slate? But Maxey being in would make me feel a lot better about paying up for Embiid because his ownership would stay down probably. If Maxey's out, he's going to end up being like really chalky, I would imagine, because he's only 10.5K. He's a full 1,000 cheaper than Jokic, and he's already coming in with a 57-point fantasy projection. The matchup is not great, but it's whatever. He's a stud. He's matchup proof. It's a huge game. If the Sixers are going to make a series of this, he's got to show up in this game, and I think he will. So I'm hoping that. I think I'm on Joel Embiid anyways. He's my top play of the entire slate. I just hope Maxey plays so his ownership stays in check. Elsewhere, Tobias Harris, Kelly Oubre, Kyle Lowry. These guys are getting monster minutes with or without Maxey. They're smash plays in my opinion. Let me just double check the minutes in game one. Yeah, I mean, Tobias had foul trouble, so he actually was limited to 31 minutes. He didn't have a good game, but I mean, foul trouble aside, these guys are going to play a ton. Lowry had 38 minutes, Maxey had 43, Oubre had 38, and Lowry and Oubre were really, really good for fantasy purposes. Oubre had 5 steals. I don't know if we can expect that again, but I would imagine he'd be a little bit better offensively than he was in game one, 10 points. So if Maxey's out, these guys look awesome. All the Sixers across the board look really, really good. Even with him in, these guys are really cheap for the minutes they're getting. I would start it at Lowry because 4.4K. I know he's like 100 years old, but 4.4K for a guy who's going to play 39 minutes. Yeah. Yes, I want that. Kelly Oubre at 5.6 would be the next guy up, and Tobias at 5.9 is third in line there. So can you play all these dudes? Yeah, I think you can. They're cheap enough, and then you can go get them beat if you want. Or you can just hope that the rest of the Sixers blow up and then like maybe don't use Embiid and go get Jokic or come down to like, Anthony Davis or something. I'm going Embiid. Right now I'm going Embiid with Oubre and Lowry. But by the way, if Maxey is out, then you would see an uptick in minutes for guys like Batum, perhaps Buddy Hield, Cam Payne. Cam Payne played 2.5 minutes in the first game. Not great. And Buddy Hield played 11. So obviously if Maxey's out, one or both those guys are going to see a slight uptick in minutes, and then they'd be viable. I would just personally put the onus more on the Sixers. I'm already interested regardless. And again, I hope Maxey plays. It's a huge game. I'm sure he'll be out there even if he's not 100%. On the other side, we have the Knicks. Knicks have been known all year long for grinding their guys into the ground. It doesn't really change with, these games being super important. I will note, though, that Dante DiVincenzo only played 24 minutes in the first game. Bojan Bogdanovic ate into that. He had 24 minutes. Miles McBride had 28 minutes. So it looks like come playoff time, Tibbs is going to be a little bit more judicious with how he uses his guys. Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson were really the only guys who didn't have their minutes touched. Even OG Anunoby only played 31 minutes. So these guards off the bench, if they're going to be eating into these guys, we got to be a little bit careful with what Knicks we're playing. So right now, while those guys are still playable, Knicks starters are always going to be playable. I think I'd really just lean towards Brunson and Hart. Brunson has a great projection at 52 fantasy points, 37% boom rating. Great play. Nothing wrong with Brunson. The only issue with Brunson is like you have very good plays kind of just below him or right in that price range that you can pivot to. You got LeBron and Brow, very similar price. I'll talk about Jamal Murray in the next game here. And then you have, Spida, who's cheaper, Maxey, who's cheaper. So it's hard to make Brunson a total locked-in priority, but he's a very good play. Hart, due to the minutes and the price, only 6.9K, looks pretty good. I don't know if he's a core play for me or anything, but he's definitely viable. I will point out OG and Isaiah Hartenstein, 5.2K and 5.1K. That's pretty good. I mean, if we can get a little more minutes out of those guys, notably Hartenstein, he only played 17 minutes in the first game, then I would feel a lot better about those price points for sure. Look at this massive mug, by the way. It's almost as big as my head. But to my point before, if Hartenstein and OG and DiVincenzo are going to lose these minutes, we can go save some cash, not calf, with Bogdanovic maybe at 3.7K, Miles McBride at 4.3, maybe even Mitchell Robinson if Hartenstein's going to get in foul trouble against Joel Embiid. I'm okay with it. I just don't think these guys are necessarily priorities. All right, last game of the night, we got the Lakers and Nuggets. Probably the game to stack if you want to stack a game on this 3-game slate. Lakers, obviously, if they want a chance in this series, they got to even it up here. I don't think they do. I don't think they win the game, but I am going to bet that they make it close and give us a really good game and scare Denver a little bit here. If they're going to do that, obviously, Brow and LeBron have to play well again. Both are very, very good. Brow is looking like the better play with a 47% boom rating. I actually like LeBron more, though. He's $100 cheaper, and he's really not that far off in projection by 3 fantasy points, and he's coming in at half the ownership. So while you can definitely play Anthony Davis, especially if you're not going to play Jokic or Embiid, I prefer LeBron. I think he's the better play in tournaments. D'Lo at 6.3, that's really cheap. I like D'Lo quite a bit. Austin Reeves at 6 flat, really cheap. I like him quite a bit. They were quiet in the first game. I expect them to be a little bit louder in this game. You can pair them together, or you can use one. Right now, I love Austin Reeves for the reason that he has a decent projection. He doesn't cost that much, and he's the lowest owned Lakers starter. So I expect him to pop off a little bit here, and I love that he's coming at sub 10% ownership. I like that a lot. As far as value goes, let me just double check what Rui did in the first game. I mean, he started and played 31 minutes, I think at 4.9K. That's a decent value. He's going to play a good amount. And they need him to score more. He only had 7 points in the first game. If he can get it going, that will be of help to them. As far as value, I guess Spencer Dinwiddie at 3.6, but he only played 13 minutes in the first game. I would feel a little bit better about Taurean Prince, who played 20 minutes, and that's probably about what we should expect, 20 minutes off the bench. So I think he's probably the value play for the Lakers I'd look at, but right now I'm not getting to any value plays in the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers look good overall. I would just be going with, their usual starters. All right, on the other side, we got Jokic leading the way with 64 fantasy point projection and a 41% boom rating. He is the best play of the slate as far as raw points projection goes. The only problem is he is 11.5K. It's always tough to fade Jokic on a tiny slate. It's really tough to fade him anytime. But he's not carrying much ownership. It is going to be extra hard to ignore him if he's not going to be owned. So if this flips, right now I do like Embiid as my top spend. If this flips and Embiid's like super chalky, I might strategically go with like a lot of Philly guys, but close with what would end up being a pretty unowned Jokic. Right now he's coming at 14% ownership. It's too low, really, when you look at his upside. He can get like 90. So you could bet on that. You could bet on Embiid just getting like 50 or 60 and not really, totally nuking the slate, and then Jokic coming out and like really making people regret that they faded him. As things stand, though, I don't think Jokic is totally necessary. I think the ownership and all that kind of tells the correct story here. Jamal Murray, on the other hand, at 7.8K is too cheap. He wrecked the Lakers in the playoffs last year and continued doing that in game one with 50 fantasy points. The only problem with him, he's super, super chalky, 48% ownership. So sometimes you just got to pick your spots here. I think this is kind of good chalk. His 41% boom rating, he projects really well, pushing for 50 fantasy points. He's just too cheap. So you definitely could argue if he's going to be almost 50% owned, we can pivot off of him to Maxey or Spida or Banchero or what have you. You can make a move to somebody who's significantly less owned, and then instead of going with Murray, you could go with Jokic, who is basically going ignored. So for tournaments, that definitely is a very good strategy. If I'm rolling out multiple lineups, I would be underweight at Jamal Murray at this point. But I mean, I came into the slate loving Jamal Murray. Should I go away from Jamal Murray just because he's chalky? I don't know if I want to do that, really. I think he's a really good play. The rest of these guys are just okay. MPJ, Aaron Gordon, they're going to play a lot. They're 6.2K or less. They're going to carry a little bit of ownership. For a 3-game slate, 20 to 27% ownership shouldn't deter you either way. Chalky KCP, 36% ownership. That's a little bit troubling. But he's fine. I mean, let's see. How did he do in the first game? He played 36 minutes. He's going to play. He's going to shoot threes and maybe get some steals. He got 3 steals in game one. So he's just a regular 3-and-D guy. They're not playing their bench guys a lot of minutes. So I'm okay with it just from a raw minutes perspective. 4.6K is totally fine. All right, that is going to do it for me. Like I said, I went into the slate loving Embiid, LeBron, and Jamal as my main guys. I don't think I can get LeBron in there with Embiid and Jamal right now, just because I don't want to stretch myself too thin. There are a lot of cheap value guys that I do like, namely the Sixers guys and the 2 Magic guys that I pointed out. That's probably where I'll start with my value. And then it just depends. If Maxey's out, that does change things a little bit for me, because I don't necessarily want to play a super chalky Embiid when there's alternatives on the slate. And then if the Jamal Murray ownership sticks, I have to at least consider leveraging that with a Jokic play or pivoting to somebody else like Maxey or something if he's in. But as things stand, my build is Embiid. Actually, let me pull up my exact lineup. This is where I'm starting the day. And My process is I do this, I go through this, I look at the projections and ownership, I map up my lineup, and then I run a lot of different lineups in DFS Hero, and then I run their sims, and then I find the thing I like the best, make a tweak or two, and that's my single entry lineup. And if you're going to run a lot of lineups, you don't have to worry about it quite as much. Just tweak your ownership levels a little bit. But right now I have Suggs, Lowry, Oubre, Isaac, Embiid, Reeves, MPJ, and Jamal Murray. So as things stand, that might end up being pretty chalky. It might end up being pretty chalky. I know for sure Isaac, and let's actually double check the ownership real quick. So yeah, Jamal Murray's owned. MPJ 27%. That's not too bad. I had Reeves. He's unowned right now, 9%. I think it is. Yep, 9%. So that's good. Knicks side, I don't think I have any Knicks, which is totally fine. Philly side, Lowry's pretty owned at 26%, but that's not egregious yet, so I'm okay with that. Oubre at 19%, also totally fine. That would spike greatly if Maxey is out, though, so consider that. The Cleveland side, I have nobody. And on the Orlando side, how chalky are these guys? Isaac's very chalky. And instead of the Gary Harris chalk, I'm going down to Suggs, who is going to be owned, but not like egregiously so. Oh, yeah. And then Embiid is 15%. So if that all sticks, I think that's okay. Suggs and MPJ are not that owned, and Embiid and Reeves are really not very owned relative to the slate. And you just check that, update it, and tweak it as needed. All right, so hopefully it helps you out. If it does, please give me a like on this video and also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for tuning in, and good luck.